Well, this is actually one of our favorite kinds of fulfillment because this is a direct prophecy written by the prophet Isaiah 600 years before Christ, and then Christ came in. And Isaiah 53 is a remarkable picture of the Messiah, a remarkable picture indeed. So it reads for us, "He is despised and rejected by men, a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief. And we hid, as it were, our faces from him. He was despised, and we did not esteem him. Surely he has borne our griefs and carried our sorrows. Yet we esteemed him stricken, smitten by God, and afflicted. But he was wounded for our transgressions. He was bruised for our iniquities. The chastisement of our peace was upon him, and by his stripes we are healed. All we like sheep have gone astray. We have turned every one to his own way, and the Lord has laid on him the iniquity of us all." So the Jewish people recognized that this was messianic. Now, it's really important that we recognize that just like we can't say, well, Christians believe, right? We say Christians believe, well, which Christians, right? We've got Baptists and Methodists and Mennonites, and we had all sorts of wild diversity within the Christian world, and Judaism, first century Judaism, was not different by any substantial measure. There you had Pharisees and Sadducees and Zealots and all the other groups that were kind of more politically aligned after a fashion, but then also you had various people who would have their own, cobbled together versions or ideas about God. So you can't speak monolithically about Jewish belief. However, we can find out what various ancient Jewish people did believe and taught and how they discussed it. So just to be sure that we're not oversimplifying it, it wasn't as if, as you look at ancient Judaism, that it was this single track, monolithic, everybody believed the same thing. In fact, it was interesting that because they were ethnically united, right? They're ethnically united as Jewish people, as God's chosen people. Because of that, they were able to have greater diversity because what really united them was being God's chosen people, was circumcision, was the temple rituals, right? And so then they had some pretty wild difference in their views, and yet they would say, well, but we're all Jewish. Like we're all circumcised. We all do these things, and so on and so forth. So anyway, one of the various Jewish beliefs was that there were two types of messiahs, or two messiahs that may come. There was the Messiah, son of Joseph, and that was the suffering Messiah, just as Joseph went into slavery and captivity in order to save the nation of Israel, the fledgling nation of Israel, the family. And the Messiah would come and suffer and then lead them out of their sin, or out of the struggle of their sin. And then there was the Messiah, son of David, or Hamashiach ben David. And this Messiah, son of David, was the king, the ruling king. And so they thought, if we're really good as we approach this time of the coming Messiah, and that's what Daniel had told them. Daniel lined up that they should be looking for the Messiah at this point. I said if they'd been really good, they thought they'd get that Davidic Messiah. And if they had sin or if they had problems, then they would get this suffering Messiah, this Messiah, son of Joseph. And what it shows is that, and this is understandable, but they did not understand the gravity of sin. They didn't understand that it wasn't just about their individual sets of sins or failures to follow God, but in fact that everybody, the entire world, needed a permanent and eternal sacrifice for sin. The Jews today interpret this passage as applying to Israel and Israel suffering for the sins of the world, and yet the meaning of it is so clear it's almost embarrassing. This passage gives us the core information of the gospel. And the funny thing is that we can fall into the same aspect of thinking that our little set of sins, the things that we've done, are the problem. But the problem between God and man is not just the individual sins, those are a problem as well, but it is the entire problem and reality of sin throughout all this world that has infected this entire cosmos. And that is where we need Jesus Christ to come in, to identify with us entirely in our humanity, and yet to be also entirely divine, so that he could pay the final and ultimate penalty. Were he only a man, even a perfect man, he could die only for the sins of one other. But because he is God, he is able to make a once and for all sacrifice that is efficacious or powerful unto all people and to all sin throughout all the world. And Christ is the substitute. Christ is the one who's paid the penalty for our sin. And so, as Matthew uses this example of Jesus taking sickness, which is a result of sin, and casting away demons, which we're vulnerable to only because of sin, and says that Jesus has taken our weakness, our sin upon himself. He's using a fuller picture. Yes, did he take sickness and did he cast out demons? Yes, absolutely he did. But that was only for the express purpose of showing that he alone would be qualified to do what Isaiah 53 really says, to take away our sins, that the chastisement or the punishment for our peace with God, would be on him. How wonderful this good news. And I hope today, if you haven't already, I hope today you trust in Jesus Christ's perfect payment for your sin. It's eternal. It's a once and for all exchange of life. He takes your sin and it goes away, paid for by his blood. He gives you his righteousness. We all, like sheep, have gone astray. Every single one of us have turned to our own way. But the Lord has laid on him all your sin and all my sin, so that we might be free from sin forever, that we might be healed.